Found my husband's journal. He wished I was gone to marry his mistress. I faked a suicide attempt to reveal their affair. Hi everyone, my name is Margaret, and if you're reading this, well, I guess you want to hear my story. It's one that I never thought I'd share on a forum like this, but here we are. I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood that seems straight out of a glossy magazine. Perfect manicured lawns, kids playing safely on the streets, and community BBQs every other weekend. From the outside, my life probably looks like a dream come true. I'm in my mid-30s, married to the love of my life, Evan, or at least that's what I thought. We have 2 beautiful kids, a cozy home, and what seemed like a solid partnership that was supposed to last a lifetime. But not everything is as perfect as it appears. I never imagined that one random afternoon would turn my whole world upside down. I was doing some spring cleaning, something I always find therapeutic, and I decided to tackle the mess in our bedroom. Evan is usually very particular about his things, and he has this old, leather-bound journal that he's been scribbling in ever since I met him. He's always kept it private, and I respected that boundary, until today. Maybe it was the way it was just carelessly left on his nightstand, maybe it was something else, a gut feeling I couldn't shake. With a hesitant hand, I opened it. I told myself I'd just take a peek, just see what kinds of things he wrote about. Was it work stress? His thoughts on fatherhood? I was curious. What I didn't expect was to find my name scattered all over the recent entries, not as his wife or the mother of his children, but as an obstacle in his life. With every page I turned, my heart sank deeper. The man I had shared my bed with for over a decade wished I was dead. No, he was practically plotting a life without me, imagining a future with someone else, someone named Lucia. My mind raced, and a chill ran down my spine. Who was Lucia? His co-worker? More than that? I stood there, frozen, the journal heavy in my hands. Everything started to make sense. The late nights, the missed dinners, the detached kisses. But nothing could have prepared me for the pain of reading those words, written in his neat handwriting that I had loved so much. It felt like a betrayal of the worst kind, not just of our vows, but of all the years we had built our lives together. And that's just the beginning of this mess. As I sit here typing this, I know I have to do something. But what? How do you confront the man who wishes you dead? How do you protect your children from a storm that's about to break? I guess I'm about to find out. After finding Evan's journal and absorbing the initial shock of the words scrawled across the pages, I was left numb. I remember sitting at the edge of our bed, the journal open on my lap, staring blankly at the wall opposite me. My mind was racing, yet I felt frozen in place. I had to read it again. I had to be sure I wasn't misinterpreting his words. So, I turned back to the first page I had opened, and this time, I started taking notes, marking down the entries that mentioned me, Lucia, or anything related to his dark wishes. One entry hit me like a punch to the stomach. It was dated about 3 months ago, around the time when Evan started coming home late more frequently. The entry read, "Another night pretending to tolerate Margaret's mundane conversation over dinner. How much longer can I bear this? I find myself daydreaming more and more about a life without her. A life with Lucia. There's a vibrant spark with her that Margaret extinguished long ago in our marriage. Sometimes I wish Margaret would just disappear, make it easy for me to be with the one I truly love." Tears blurred my vision as I read those words. Disappear? Was my presence in his life so unbearable that he wished I would just vanish? The man I had loved, who had promised to cherish me in sickness and in health, now wished me gone from this world so he could be with someone else. Flipping through more pages, I found an entry from last week. Every day, the idea grows stronger in me. If Margaret were out of the picture, how simple life could be. Lucia agrees. We've whispered about a future together, just the 2 of us, free from the shackles of my current life. It's a cruel thought, but a tempting one. Freedom is just a tragedy away. Reading Evan's thoughts about me, about us, was excruciating. I couldn't understand. Where had I failed him? What had I done to deserve such harsh rejection and dark wishes? Amidst the turmoil in my mind, a small, dangerous thought began to take root. If Evan wanted a tragedy, maybe I could give him one. But not in the way he expected. My heart raced as the beginnings of a plan started to form. A plan to expose him, to bring his secret desires into the light and see how he'd handle the fallout. I wasn't just going to be a victim in his twisted fantasy. I spent the rest of the day in a daze, pretending to function normally while the kids were around. I cooked dinner, helped them with their homework, and put them to bed, all the while feeling like a shell of myself. Evan came home late, as usual, giving me a distracted peck on the cheek before settling down with his laptop at the dining table. "Busy day?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Yeah, just catching up on some work, he replied without looking up. I nodded, biting back the anger and hurt. Okay, let me know if you need anything. As I walked away, I knew one thing for sure. I needed to gather more evidence, to document everything. If I was going to expose Evan and protect myself and my children, I needed to be strategic. But first, I needed to ensure my own emotional armor was intact, to face what was undoubtedly going to be the toughest battle of my life. The days that followed were some of the longest of my life. Each moment felt heavy with the secret knowledge of Evan's true feelings, hidden beneath a facade of normalcy. I kept up appearances, maintaining the routine of our daily life, all while my mind worked overtime planning my next steps. I couldn't carry this burden alone anymore. I needed an ally. That's when I decided to confide in my closest friend, Lisa. We met at our usual coffee spot, a quaint little cafe tucked away from the usual hustle. It was the kind of place where secrets seemed safe within its cozy walls. Lisa, I began, my voice barely above a whisper. I need to tell you something important. I slid the photocopies of Evan's journal entries across the table to her. Her eyes widened as she read, her expression shifting from confusion to horror. Oh, Margaret, this is just awful, she murmured, her hand reaching out to cover mine. What are you going to do? I've been thinking, I started, my voice steadier as I spoke my plan into existence. What if Evan got what he wished for, but not in the way he expects? What if I made him believe that his wish was coming true? Lisa nodded slowly, understanding beginning to dawn. You mean to fake a crisis? Exactly, I affirmed. A fake suicide attempt. Carefully staged, safe, but convincing enough to bring everything out into the open, to force his hand, make him reveal his affair with Lucia publicly, and show his true colors. Lisa was silent for a moment, considering the implications. It's risky, Margaret, but if done right, it could expose him without putting you in real danger. We need to plan every detail meticulously. Over the next several days, we mapped out the plan. We decided I would start by planting more evident signs of despair that Evan could not ignore. Withdrawn behavior at home, vague but concerning texts left open on my phone, a visibly neglected appearance, and most crucially, a series of diary entries that mirrored the tone of hopelessness and desolation. Simultaneously, I would set the stage for the attempt. I booked a weekend away under the guise of needing some alone time to think about our marriage, ensuring the location was safe and private. Lisa would be in on every step, ready to intervene at a moment's notice. We even involved a therapist to consult on how to execute this without actual harm, and to have professional oversight to ensure my emotional stability throughout this ordeal. The final piece involved making sure Lucia would be drawn into the scenario. Through subtle hints and manipulated encounters, facilitated by mutual friends who were unwittingly roped into my plan, Lucia's involvement with Evan would become more visible to everyone around us, including their co-workers and our social circle. As the day of the attempt approached, my nerves were stretched tight. I rehearsed every step, every action. This performance was not just for Evan, but for an audience that would need to see his reaction, his real priorities when pushed to the brink. The night before I was to leave for the weekend, I lay in bed next to Evan, watching him sleep. Part of me wanted to confront him right there, throw the journal at him, and demand answers. But a bigger part knew that this needed to play out my way. For me, for our children, for the truth. And so, with a heavy heart but a determined spirit, I set the plan in motion, not knowing how things would unfold, but certain that there was no turning back. The weekend I chose for my desperate act was cloudy and somber, mirroring the storm of emotions inside me. I left home early in the morning with only a small bag and a heart heavy with the plan I was about to execute. The note I left for Evan was deliberately laden with despair, hinting at an unbearable inner turmoil, but leaving out specifics, just enough to ignite worry. Driving to the remote cottage I had rented for this act, I felt each mile stretch out, filled with the weight of what I was about to do. The place was isolated, surrounded by dense woods, the perfect setting for someone looking to disappear. My phone was switched off. Evan's calls would go unanswered, escalating his panic. Once at the cottage, I meticulously set the stage for my attempt. Empty pill bottles, filled with harmless sugar pills, were left prominently on the nightstand, a glass of water spilled over as if in a struggle, and a crumpled note on the table, written in my shakiest hand, filled with farewells and unresolved love. I dressed the part too, my appearance disheveled, as if I'd been neglecting myself in deep despair. Laying on the bed, I practiced slowing my breathing, ready to feign unconsciousness. This was it. No turning back now. Hours later, I heard the crunch of gravel outside, a car hastily parked. Doors slammed, followed by rushed footsteps to the cottage door. My heart raced as I steadied my breathing, playing my role. The door flew open, and in rushed Evan, his face flushed with an emotion I couldn't quite read in the dim light. But it wasn't alone worry etching his features. It was something darker, a twisted relief that chilled me to the bone. Lucia was right behind him, her presence confirming not just an affair, but a shared stake in this gruesome wish. Evan's eyes found me on the bed, and for a moment his lips curled into a grim smile, before his expression shifted abruptly to concern upon noticing the setup, a sign he thought he was witnessing the fulfillment of his darkest wish. "Margaret?" His voice cracked, a perfect blend of relief and staged panic. He approached, hesitating as if unsure how to play this unexpected scene. I lay still, unresponsive, listening to the tremor in his voice as he called my name again, louder, more desperate, likely for Lucia's benefit who lingered by the door, a silent spectator caught in her own trap. "Call an ambulance," he shouted, the panic seeming real now as he touched my wrist, checking for a pulse he knew he would find. His actions were rehearsed, too smooth, too calculated. Lucia, clutching her phone, dialed for emergency services, her voice trembling, betraying her fear. "We need an ambulance at—" She rattled off the address, her eyes never leaving my still form on the bed. As the sirens grew closer, reality seemed to crash down on Evan. Whatever brief relief or dark satisfaction he had felt at my supposed demise was now overshadowed by the impending consequences of his arrival with Lucia. Paramedics rushed in, taking over, their professional assessment and questions a blur as they prepped me for transport. Evan followed closely, his hand gripping mine, a show of concern that couldn't erase the initial horror of his arrival. At the hospital, once I was declared stable and left alone under the pretense of needing rest, Evan stayed by my bedside, his face a mask of worry that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Why, Margaret? Why would you think this was the only way?" His voice was soft, filled with a feigned confusion that sickened me. Sitting up slowly, I turned to face him directly, the truth sharp in my voice. "I read your journal, Evan. I know about the freedom you desired so fervently. Was it a relief, thinking you were finally free?" Evan staggered back, the color draining from his face as he stumbled for words. His mask fell away, revealing the raw, selfish core beneath. His glance towards the door, where Lucia lingered just out of sight, was all the confirmation I needed of his guilt and betrayal. In the sterile light of the hospital room, the atmosphere was thick with the weight of exposed secrets. Evan, looking pale and unnerved, tried to regain his footing in the conversation, but his words faltered as the reality of the situation settled around him. "You read my journal?" he finally managed, his voice barely a whisper, laced with a mix of shock and a dawning sense of dread. "Yes, Evan, every word," I responded firmly, sitting upright in the hospital bed, my strength returning with each spoken truth. "I saw what you wrote about me, about us, about Lucia, how you wished I would just disappear." Evan's eyes darted nervously toward the door, where Lucia stood frozen, a silent witness to the unraveling of her secret world with Evan. Her presence in the doorway was a damning testament to their affair, making any denial futile. "Margaret, Evan started, his voice cracking under the strain. "Don't," I cut him off sharply. "Don't try to explain it away. I want to know one thing. Was it worth it? Was this fantasy of a life without me, where you're free with Lucia, worth destroying everything we built together?" Evan sank into a chair beside the bed, his face in his hands, the facade of the loving husband crumbling before my eyes. He was silent for a long moment, his shoulders shaking slightly, as if the weight of his own deceit was too much to bear. Finally, he looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. "I don't know, Margaret. I thought it was what I wanted, but seeing you like this, thinking I had lost you, it's made me realize I've made a terrible mistake." The admission was a hollow victory. His remorse, whether genuine or not, did nothing to erase the pain of his betrayal. It was clear to me now that our marriage, built on what I thought was mutual love and respect, was nothing more than a convenient arrangement for Evan until something he deemed better came along. The door opened, and a nurse entered, casting a wary glance at Evan before turning to me with a professional smile. "We're going to move you to another room for observation overnight, just to be safe," she announced, her voice a calm in the storm that had engulfed my life. As they prepared to wheel me out, I turned to look at Evan one last time. "I want you to leave, Evan. Go home, pack your things. I can't live with someone who wishes me dead. We're done." Evan stood slowly, the reality of his situation settling in as he nodded, defeated. "I'll go," he said quietly. "I'm so sorry, Margaret." Lucia, still hovering in the doorway, seemed uncertain, her dream of a life with Evan evaporating before her eyes. As Evan passed her, he paused, but no words were exchanged, a silent acknowledgement that their affair was as broken as the marriage it had helped destroy. As I was wheeled out of the room, I felt a surge of mixed emotions, relief that the truth was out, sadness for the love I thought we had, and a fierce determination to rebuild my life, not just for my sake, but for our children who deserved a stable, loving environment. The hospital corridor seemed to stretch on forever, each turn taking me further away from the life I had known with Evan. Ahead was uncertainty, but also a chance to start anew, free from the shadows of deceit. In the weeks following my discharge from the hospital, the solitude of the house served as both a refuge and a stark reminder of the upheaval in my life. With Evan gone, the emptiness was palpable, each room echoing with memories of a life that once seemed destined to last forever. Our children, too innocent to fully grasp the complexity of our separation, sensed the shift, their usual exuberance replaced by subdued curiosity and occasional silence. My days were spent reassessing and slowly rebuilding. The legal consultations about the divorce became a routine that, while draining, empowered me with the clarity to safeguard my children's futures and my own. As these plans solidified, the support of those around me became my lifeline. Friends, some long silent, reached out, filling my days with comforting presence and reaffirming the strength of community bonds. Lisa, ever the steadfast friend, was a daily figure in this new phase of life, her support unwavering as she helped me navigate both motherhood and independence. Together, we repainted the kids' rooms, their bright new walls a testament to the fresh start we were all embracing. Laughter gradually returned to our home, a sound I cherished deeply as it marked a return to normalcy for my children. During an afternoon coffee with a group of mutual friends, a routine attempt to reintroduce social normalcy into my life, one of them, hesitant at first, shared a piece of news that momentarily unmoored me. "Margaret, Evan, and Lucia. They're expecting a child," she said softly, her eyes sympathetic, knowing the weight her words carried. The news hit with a surprising mix of emotions. There was an initial sting, a brief resurgence of the betrayal that I thought I had moved past. But as I let the information sink in, another feeling emerged more strongly. Affirmation. It affirmed that my decision to end the marriage, however painful, was the right one. It underscored that Evan's path had diverged from mine long before I had the courage to admit it. The rest of the conversation blurred into background noise as I processed the implications. This revelation didn't change my path, it only strengthened my resolve to continue on it. I was free from a relationship that was built on deceit, free to build a future on honesty and real affection. Over the next days, I found myself reflecting on the journey. The pain had been profound, the betrayal deep, but the growth was undeniable. I was emerging not just as someone who had survived a failed marriage, but as someone who was thriving beyond it. The love for my children, the support of my friends, and my own inner resilience were the pillars of my new life. As I put my children to bed that night, watching them drift into sleep with a peace that had once seemed so distant, I felt a surge of hope for our future. We were moving forward together, and while the path was uncharted, it was ours to shape. Looking ahead, I embraced the uncertainty of the future, not with fear, but with an open heart and a clear mind, ready to face whatever came our way with the same strength that had brought me this far.